All right, we are live. I believe three, two, one. Okay, I'm gonna keep on checking out the chats to make sure that there's no technical issues because every day I'm trying to change this up a little bit, and I know it's gonna bite me in the butt. Yang Gang, good evening. Thank you for joining Securing the Bag with Seth Underwood. This is your host, Seth Underwood. In case you were not too sure about that. Like I say all the time, we have so much to talk about tonight and very little time to do so because the technological singularity is at hand. But you know what's closer than the technological singularity? The 2019 Democratic debates in the summer. We are 20 days away, the big 2-0. I'm still excited as ever. It feels like it's just approaching like a monolithic, ominous cloud reaching us. And there's one lightning strike in that cloud, and it is Andrew Yang, and he's going to be showering us all with money, $1,000 specifically in your bank account every month. So help me secure the bag, everyone. I need 1,000 subscribers. We are at 978 left. We can easily do that. I'm calling it 1,000 subscribers for $1,000 a month. I would greatly appreciate it if you haven't subscribed already to hit the subscribe button and to share this with everyone else. We have a lot to talk about, as I just said. Today's meat and potatoes is automation and the adpocalypse. I'm about a day late on this, I know, but there's a lot of interesting discussion that I think we have to have from a Yang lens when it comes to the type of censorship that we're seeing online. In case you weren't aware, another wave of what appears to be leftist agenda. I hate to use it in such kind of political terms, but censorship on a wide scale. Attacking alt right and conservative viewers, or not viewers, but commentators and personalities. They are in the ban house. They've been hit with the ban hammer. And this is pretty tricky. This is an issue because if you know anything about radicalization, if you're feeling marginalized in a way that your voice is being silenced, then you're just going to continue to go down that route. And this is just not good for anyone. But we're going to talk about that. Some of the smaller things today. We're going to deconstruct a podcast with Mehdi Hassan, who is a contributor with The Intercept. He had Andrew Yang on his podcast, and they had a uh, pretty interesting discussion. I haven't seen any of Mehdi's stuff before, or Mr. Hassan. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his first name right. But my first impression of him is not too great because this podcast was not a very good interview, if you ask me. And we're going to segue right into Elizabeth Warren because it seems like there's a little bit of karmic action happening. I was being so nice to her yesterday, saying that I'm approving of some of the things that she's doing, and then just today she comes around and makes me regret that. She's not so sure that automation is the issue, which really makes me scratch my head a little bit. So we'll get into all of that, but let's just take a look here. Looks and sounds pretty good. Thank you so much. I'm very happy for that. I moved the laptop over here, and then all of a sudden it was like the entire lighting in the room has shifted, and there's a little bit of nonsense going on here. And I want to make sure that the mic's closer to my face, but then this starts to have some issues for some reason because there's a metallic gloss on this. I have no idea how people make live green screens look so easy. I have no idea at all. You know what would really help me with setting up all of this? A universal basic income. But that's neither here nor there. Before we get into everything, I know you guys are searching for the answer to the question that's on your mind. How was my night of sleep with my self-cooling pillow? I want to really be sure here and say this is not an advertisement or any way. It feels like it is, but this has to do with the entire discussion in today's episode about the adpocalypse. I do not want to do any paid promotional advertisements or anything of that nature. Everything that I say is completely from the heart. And I want to make sure that that's just kind of known here at the beginning. With that being said, though, holy crap, this pillow is amazing. It actually works. I don't know how they've done this. There's no technology in here. I mean, unless you think of advanced pillow cooling techniques as a type of technology. And yeah, it's long enough that if you lay your head on it for too long and it gets a little warm, you can just scooch over a couple of inches, and then bam, you're met with this graceful type of coolness that just seeps into your dreams. And just makes you feel like everything's gonna be okay. It's like it's not cold. It's cool. It's cool like $1,000 in your bank account every month. It's a secure feeling, like you're being held in the arms of Andrew Yang as he tells you, "Shh, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay." Yeah, so I approve of the pillow. The pillow is really great for sure. I did have some insomnia though. I didn't have like that great of sleep, and it wasn't because of the pillow, but it was the new season of Black Mirror just came out, and they've done it again. That episode with Captain America. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I go ahead and give it a watch. This is just I'm speechless. I am so speechless as to what they did with this season already. And the one with Miley Cyrus is also very good. It's that one's like a little bit more of a San Junipero episode. And even yeah, there's not so much bleakness in these episodes so far. I've got one more to watch, and so I don't know. I may have said that and completely I'm gonna be in for a surprise, but who knows? I don't know. I'm tossing and turning all night. I've said this before on Twitter, but every now and then, like I get some crazy insomnia. There's a lot of like kind of I don't know, maybe some financial stuff. You know what might help me sleep better at night? $1,000 a month. Again, neither here nor there. Okay, so let's just take a look through here. We might as well go ahead and get started. You're so jealous of the pillow now. I'm sorry. If you got a Sam's Wholesale nearby, it was $15. Of course, you got to have like a card to get in there and everything. I'll try and find like the brand, or I sent out a tweet so you can find it there. But so far, I'm enjoying it. I'll try it again tonight, and tomorrow I'll let you know if you should or should not search for it. Okay, so let's go ahead and deconstructing with Mehdi Hassan. Again, this was a interview podcast format that he had Andrew Yang on, and he spends the first 15 minutes going into this long kind of intro that he's able to set the tone with before Andrew Yang's even on to kind of defend himself or establish himself anyway. That was the first kind of moment where I was like, I'm not sure if this is going to be great or not. And he starts by rattling off the underdogs. He's immediately grouping Andrew Yang with the underdogs, which I guess is fair. Not necessarily though. Again, he was like the sixth candidate to get both the individual donor requirement and polling requirement. So he's not that much of an underdog, but the tone's been set. He's rattling off these well-known positions of lesser-known candidates like Seth Moulton and his focus on mental health insecurity or mental health problems, and Jay Inslee with climate change, Tulsi, which I don't think of as an underdog whatsoever, Tulsi with her anti-war position, and then he left that off to segue to Andrew Yang with his rather niche and novel idea of a universal basic income to address automation and wages and things of that nature. And immediately, I know this guy obviously is not a universal basic income advocate, but it seemed apparent to me that universal basic income, its strength is that it's so versatile. You can't say that this is a niche thing that Andrew Yang is platforming, because it's addressing mental health. It's addressing better ways of addressing climate change. Like, no one's going to be able to focus on climate change if they're financially insecure all the time. They make poor decisions. If you're wanting people to make good decisions, we know that financial insecurity, poverty, they reduce the functioning level of your mental faculties. So there's so many ways that you can frame a universal basic income that I would not accept it as a niche type of policy. But again, he's saying this really before Andrew Yang's even on to talk about who he is, what a universal basic income is. But next thing you know, of course, the introduction happens. He does get a little bit of time, not very long though. I'd say about 20 seconds. And this is what I think that is going to happen during the Democratic debates, is that the moderator is going to come through and just give him the same amount of time that Mr. Hassan gave him, and it's not going to give him what he needs to get out there and really give universal basic income the kind of treatment that it needs. But again, neither here nor there. He believes that, so he says, to begin with, he starts with this kind of oppositional tone. He's not being friendly at all. He's not establishing common ground or anything like that. He's immediately, you can tell he's chomping at the bits to bring up all of the things that universal basic income is faulty with. And he starts by saying, it's hard to take you seriously when you don't take yourself so seriously. And then he's referencing the fact that Andrew Yang has said that his main goal is to sit right next to Joe Biden at the debates. And he's saying this as if it's some sort of like joke that Andrew Yang's saying. And he's missing the fact that what Andrew Yang means is that the universal basic income idea is so powerful that it's going to completely eclipse Joe Biden. And this is what I've said. This is what I've asserted before, is that, yeah, Joe Biden's going to sit there and go, oh, yeah, we need to go back before Donald Trump. We need to get him out of the White House and everything, but do nothing to actually address why Donald Trump is in office in the first place. And then Andrew Yang's going to pop through and go, listen, everyone, I'm here to give you $1,000 a month. We all know what's going on. Automation is changing the way that we live and work, and things haven't been great for decades. And this is the problem. And it's not immigrants, and it's not trade, and it's not this and this. It's this, and we all know it to be true. So after he does that, Yang's able to defend himself and does a pretty good job of doing so. And then he goes right into attacking him as a businessman on the heels of saying Donald Trump. He says, well, we already have the businessman in office, and look where that got us. And this is such a tired argument, and I'm frustrated because I know that we're just going to see a lot more of it as we go forward. Oh, you're a businessman, and that makes you terrible for the office and everything. Well, like, are we forgetting what 2016 was, when everyone kind of collectively decided we're sick of the establishment because things aren't working out? They haven't been working out. Every time that you hear from one of these pundits or one of these interviewers, like, oh, the businessman angle, the attack like that, it's kind of just like a slap in the face. It's saying, oh, okay, guys, okay, the electorate, you decided in 2016 to go a different way and it didn't work out. So let's just push you back to the abusers who have been hurting you for decades and decades. It's so tired, and we're just going to see more of it. But, what can you do? We're Yang Gang. We've got the plan. It's no issue. And so, Yang comes back to this and he says, that's, you may have a point, but the thing is, I keep on getting approached by people in Iowa, in New Hampshire, in all of these early states, and they're saying, when I hear you talk, you make me feel like how I felt when I was voting for Donald Trump. You're the type of person I envisioned I was voting for. You're talking about the problems. And of course, this is what we've all known for so long, is that people can identify, okay, yeah, this guy is saying the same things in a different angle. He's addressing it to the actual issues at play. It's so important we get this guy in office, if you ask me. So he comes back with that. That's a good way of responding. And the next thing that we kind of go into is immediately the alt-right support. So again, like back to back to back, the very first things you hear from this guy as he's addressing Andrew is just, why is this thing? Why is that thing? Why should this? And yes, that's how an interview with a presidential candidate should happen, but this was just not done in any good faith, if you ask me. And it's especially apparent with this part when he's attacking the alt-right support. I've talked about this before, the meme lords on 4chan, the white supremacists, the Charlottesville rallies, and everything like that. One thing that I want to say is that I've been over to 4chan in the past couple of days because it seems to be kind of important that we keep an eye on them to see just what kind of activity is happening. And I gotta say, there's not a hint of Andrew Yang over there anymore. Last time that I kind of paid attention to this was in February or so, and yeah, that was when it was happening. They had daily threads up on him, talking about the pink hats and everything. These days, he's nowhere to be seen at all, and I think this is because the MAGA supporters on 4chan really, they're so easy to shut him down with, okay, abortion, gun rights, these are so antithetical to what it means to be on 4chan that it's such a losing battle, I suppose, for anyone who may be on 4chan and also supporting Andrew Yang. The point that I'm making is that he's nowhere to be seen on that website. So what may have been in the past something that someone could have said, I don't think it's appropriate to keep bringing it up now. But of course, it's going to stick with them, I feel. It's going to be brought up at the debates. We already know. Bring it in. All right. So that's the thing. And this is where it gets really sticky, is Andrew Yang kind of comes back and says, obviously, I disavow any kind of alt-right white supremacist support. I don't want it. That's not what my campaign is about. And then Mr. Hassan comes through and says, well, I understand that you've disavowed all of this support and everything, but how do you explain why would they be doing this? Why would that? You're trying to understand trolls to begin with. This is the point that I've brought up in the beginning, is they have a multitude of reasons for supporting a freedom dividend. Probably, I don't know, the one that makes the most sense is the fact that it's $1,000 going in your bank account. I mean, just because they're white supremacists, that doesn't mean that they hate money. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And it's so frustrating that it's like, okay, well, it's going to be an immediate like non-starter. If anyone who calls himself a white supremacist goes on to your campaign and says they support you, well, nah, we just can't do it, right? Like, that's the issue. Like, this is like, they're trying to use the LGBTQ flag and say that this is a symbol of ethno-nationalism, the white supremacists, because they understand that like anything they associate their names to gets attacked by the left. And it's so like low level kind of approach that, okay. We need to find a better way of addressing this, because it's just going to continue happening. I'm not sure what would possibly happen, because this was a roadblock during the interview, is he's like, I don't support them whatsoever, but if I had to imagine why they may be supporting me, it's that their way of life is disintegrating. And Hassan's like, what? Their way of life is disintegrating? Or should we be concerned about that or something? Yeah, to be honest, like, Yang didn't say this, but this is what I would have said. This is also why I'm not running for president. But yeah, we should be concerned that white supremacists feel that their identity is being lost. That's exactly what drives them to become more and more radicalized. And so if getting $1,000 more a month maybe can work to cool them out, then I say that's a pretty good deal. We don't like them, but they are a part of the country. They're going to say some hateful shit. Yeah, I hate it. It's not cool. It's not great. We don't want it around. Shame them like the losers they are and get on with it. Like, I don't understand why this is such an issue for people, and why you would go to the effort of possibly derailing a campaign that's going to put more money in your bank account for this. It doesn't make sense to me. And of course, we'll see more of it, I'm sure. So we get caught up on that a little bit. Yang gets his footing and they move on. They start talking about, he says, this is the problem with the universal basic income. Either it's affordable and it's not enough to actually bring people out of poverty, or it's bringing people out of poverty, but it's unaffordable. He says this like it's some sort of maxim that people run off of, that as for why it's never been done before. That's not true at all. It's never been done before because it's just never been done before. And for people to continue saying, this is what I get caught up on. I know that $1,000 a month is most likely not enough to live off of, but especially in dual income houses, the trend that we see are that people collectively pool their universal basic income together and they're able to make more collective decisions. Right? I live in an apartment complex with 3 other people, all of us above the age of 18. All of a sudden, even before any of us work, we've got like a collected income of $48,000. And that's the type of kind of like wealth that you're able to then make better decisions off of and continue to progress forward in the future. And, even if you are one of the 1 in 10 Americans who live by themselves, if you do have a job, and if it's a minimum wage job at that, you're effectively getting the same on a month-by-month basis as a $15 minimum wage increase. So again, I understand, like, yeah, I would be in favor of a higher universal basic income. I'd be in favor of more progressive ways of funding the universal basic income, but I don't see why this is such a angle that leftists like to attack Yang on. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. And of course he goes for it. It's all been tried before, and it's like, it's getting a little tired if you ask me. I wish we could already be past the debates so we could kind of get all of it out of the way, because it just feels like a whole bunch of repeating instead of like actual conversation with constituents. And that's what I want to see a lot more of. The next thing, of course, that he goes forward and talks about is the regressive VAT. And this is, of course, what I'm working on for my next big video, is calling a regressive the VAT regressive is such a superfluous way of addressing what it actually is, which is a boost in income. In no other way have you ever had a regressive tax that actually increases income for the people at the bottom to a degree that Andrew Yang's freedom dividend does. So, like, people, this is what the leftists will do, is they're just going to go, this is just indicative of why it seems like you're attracting the alt-right, is that you're, using these types of regressive ways of actually punishing people, but putting it in a light that makes them, look better. And it's like, what is so regressive about getting $1,000 a month? Yeah, maybe some of the goods that you're buying are 10% more. You have to spend $120,000 before that 10% VAT is completely spent on the $1,000 that you're getting each month. The average American salaried worker who's receiving $75,000 a year only spends about $20,000 per year on the type of goods that the VAT's going to be applied to. So it doesn't make any sense to just sit there and go, oh, well, the VAT's regressive. Obviously, you're not going to actually benefit at all. In fact, you're just going to wind up being worse off than you were before. No, it makes no sense. Anyone who's using that argument isn't being very thoughtful. There's a lack of critical skills, critical thinking skills happening here. I'm not sure exactly. I kind of wish that it was put in those terms. I haven't heard any response come back in that way from Yang, and I'm wondering why, because it's a pretty easy thing to respond to. He says it in ways that I think we can find a better response, something that is in his arsenal that he can just whip out and be like, no, this is why, bam. I think that could maybe be a point to improve on. So I'll get in touch with the campaign. And we go forward and say, he finds his own way of responding to that. And then he says, well, why not a wealth tax? Why not be more progressive? Hassan says, I'm to the left of Bernie on many of these economic policies. He doesn't do a very good job of making that case. But anyways, he says, why not these more progressive ways of funding it? Which, again, I've said before, I'd be completely in favor of. I'd be completely in favor of a land value tax. I'd be in favor of a higher wealth tax. And Yang's getting very good with the response to this question, pointing out, hey, these people are smart enough that they're not going to have a taxable event. They're going to find ways of getting around the heightened tax that you'll place on them. I liked to bring up the fact that, hey, yeah, we had a marginal tax rate of 90% for the top earners in 1950, and then everyone likes to go through and say, oh yeah, but then they actually paid this amount, and then that voice is mysteriously gone when you bring up the fact of we need to find a way to getting this without them finding ways and loopholes around it, and the VAT is how you do it. That opposition voice is suddenly nowhere to be seen. So again, yes, it would be preferable to have more progressive ways of funding this, and that's what Yang says is, yeah, we need to find better ways, more progressive ways. Unfortunately, I don't see that as feasible, so this is the way we're going to do it instead. He does a good job of responding to that, and then he says that he understands and this is the segue into Elizabeth Warren. He brings up Elizabeth Warren. This seems to be her shtick, is, let's take down the modern robber barons. They're too powerful, they're too big, we need to break them apart and everything. And he says, yes, I understand the spirit and the wisdom that she's coming through with this, but the metrics are different. This is the same thing that I say when it comes to people saying, oh, the Industrial Revolution happened and we can see what happened there. The metrics are different this time around. And he says something very interesting. I haven't heard him say this before. It was that, what does it look like when you do like break up Amazon into a whole bunch of tiny little Amazons? What exactly does that do for the main street in the Rust Belt? No one wants to use the fourth most popular ride-sharing app, right? It's so different in the way that this social media works, and that we always use what's most popular, and you can't necessarily use the same like competitive model of the past to bring it into today's era and think that it makes sense. And he does a really good job of kind of pushing forward and saying, I like the idea behind this, but I just don't see how it's going to work. In my proposal, we start making steps towards the direction. We continue to look for better ways of doing these things. And so he also confronts abolishing the Electoral College and his stance that he doesn't think that's the best idea. Of course, we've heard this from Pete Buttigieg, and I believe I'm sorry, Elizabeth as well. And I'm kind of ambivalent on this issue. I think that there's definitely a very good point to be made that the Electoral College has seen its use. Its use is no longer relevant to this day and age. But Yang brings up a pretty good point when he brings the front that this is just going to make people only stay within highly densely packed areas. And what he's been saying from the beginning is that there's a disconnect between the constituents of more liberal areas, the San Franciscos, the New Yorks, the Los Angeleses of the country, and the areas that have been decimated by automation, and all their jobs are gone, you can't have any opportunity, your lifestyle's decreased, that's just going to make things a whole bunch worse. I completely agree with that. So I agree with Yang with everything else as well, and on this issue I would say, yeah, I like his approach a lot better. And then Hassan tries to say, are you saying that Warren and Buttigieg are being, naive about this and everything? It was just such a combative tone. I really did not like the way that this guy did his interview, but what can you do? And that's going to bring us really into a wider discussion about Elizabeth Warren. I've been keeping my eye on Joe Biden to see if he further, lit some more gasoline into the dumpster fire that happened yesterday. This has been a pretty rough week for Joe Biden, but he seems to be laying low for now, and there's not a lot of news for the rest of the candidates. But like I said, I think there's some karmic action happening because I said some nice things about Elizabeth Warren. I liked some things that she was doing, and then here she comes saying that actually automation's not the issue, she says. Let me go through here and actually see, because I need to just flip through this and make sure that I'm keeping up to date and not missing anything. Let's see here. So, silence. Dead air. Dead air is not good. So yeah, Warren comes through and says that job loss due to automation is not really the issue that we're dealing with. And again, this makes me really scratch my head. I don't understand exactly how you go through and you say the American people are living tougher and tougher lives. And you don't, if you're not able to come to the conclusion that this is automation happening, then what kind of math are you doing in your head? It's obviously not the kind of math that the Yang Gang's doing. What else would be causing the issues? She's saying, oh, I guess the fact that people aren't as unionized as much anymore or anything like that. 95% of the jobs since 2005 created have been temporary or gig economy jobs. Only about 5% of them have been well-paying, career-established, very good-paying jobs. The jobs are being added less over the years than they had been over the past. And what this screams to me is that Elizabeth Warren is coming through and she says, I have to kind of remain on this scale of we need more jobs is the way. And I've said before, I think that's the wrong direction to take. I need to back that up with a lot of, talk as well, because that's such a different thing. Everywhere in the world, it's always more jobs. It's always more jobs. More jobs is the answer, but it's also more than that. It's good jobs. It's well-paying jobs. It's jobs that people will seek out and find. And you have to go through the discussion about, people are going to want to work. You have to have that discussion. We need to have that discussion more often. I think that's why I'm so excited about Yang, is because, everyone likes to talk about these things, beyond just the superfluous political discussion of the day-to-day things. People like to be a little bit more philosophical if you let them. I find if you spark up a philosophical conversation, they'll take it with you. You just have to find your way and navigate your way around the political bent, the political aspects of them. And people want to talk about this a lot more, but it's the politically correct optical way of looking at it to say more jobs are the answer. So there is a comment that was made by a user called RETTIWTFD. I have no idea what that is. And this was on Reddit. And I want to take this and talk about what he says here, because it was so good. He says, I don't feel like creating a Medium account to comment. somewhat familiar with the German study, which was part of personal Yang's research prior to his donation, I think Team Warren is missing a couple important points from the study. He says, still, kudos to them for solid citations on each policy proposal. Yang's campaign should match that. He says, quote, it's a good story. Robots and other new technologies made American manufacturing workers more productive, so companies needed to hire far fewer actual human beings. A good story, except not true. That's a quote from what Elizabeth Warren has been saying. So Team Warren are smart enough to only focus on the loss of existing jobs and not the loss of new jobs. That's the caveat that we want to focus on. How can robots lead to fewer manufacturing jobs in equilibrium but stabilize existing employment relationship in manufacturing firms? One explanation is that robots mainly induce firms to create fewer new jobs but not directly displace incumbent workers. And if you're familiar with that graph with the oil rig count before the 2008 recession, you see oil rigs and employment going down, down, down as the economy gets worse and worse. And then after it, once the fat's been trimmed, once they've tightened the belt, they find, you know what, we actually didn't need as many workers as we did before. And you can see it on this graph that like automation has caused the rig count to go back up to where it was to pre-recession levels, and yet employment has stayed exactly where it was at the end of the recession. So you'll find that there's not like a direct loss in jobs immediately. It happens after the companies have to tighten the belt, and then they really are able to like put their output productivity to the test. And then you see, okay, well, it didn't necessarily cause an immediate loss in jobs. It caused less jobs to be created over the long term. So he goes on to say the negative impact of robots on equilibrium employment growth and manufacturing, which we found in section 4 of this report, may therefore result from lower rates of new entry. For returnees, we find no such effect, but not from a direct destruction of existing jobs. Stated differently, if robots are a negative shock to industry-level labor demand, it materializes mainly by fewer new vacancies that are created or by omitted replacements when a vacancy arises from natural turnover. Robots foreclose entry into manufacturing for young people. And this last paragraph here is what I was most interested in here. It was, by contrast, we find significant earnings gain for the roughly 9% of high-skilled workers with completed university education, especially in panel C of this report. We find significant earning losses, mainly for machine operators, who mostly tend to be medium-skilled workers. Their previous tasks may become somewhat obsolete because robots, by definition, do not require a human operator anymore, but have the potential of conducting many production steps autonomously. Earnings gain, however, are realized in occupations such as management and law, as well as technical and natural sciences, where university-trained workers are strongly overrepresented. So overall, what's happening here, we're seeing that the lesser skilled employees are having their earnings reduced over time, and this is exactly what we see. 40 years of wage stagnation in the country. Where does that all come from? It's come from the displacement of human value and what they're able to negotiate in terms of bargaining power. What the hell? Where's the Yang Gang? That's what I'm saying, man. Be sure to tweet and respond. Keep yourself subscribed. Tell others to subscribe as well. We'll get there. It's still the early days. A lot of views come after this stream, I've found, so that's good. So as I've been saying here, we're talking about the fact that automation, it's easy just to think, oh, wow, everything's going to just disappear right overnight. That's not the case. The case is that this is a long process that's been occurring over the last 40 years, and it's directly led to a worsened quality of life. So let's see here. Where was I going with this? Where in the world? Right. This person makes a very good point too. He says creating jobs is just boggling. What is the point of all this hard work? To create more work? As I've said before, I would be totally a fan of creating a robust jobs program for people, a robust green jobs program for people, but we have to stop this obsession with every single person having to be employed when we have this kind of autonomous tech that is clearly disrupting the workforce. People will choose to work outside of having their basic needs met, and we see this from every rich person who still decides to go through and disrupt the country. Elon Musk is not building robots or is not building rockets because he's afraid of becoming homeless. It just makes no sense. Universal basic income has much more to do than just jobs, but I feel that the Elizabeth Warren campaign is starting to set up their own their own response to this question, which is going to be asked at the debates because of Andrew Yang. Because he's there, each campaign's going to have to craft their own pre-constructed response to the question of automation, and here is Elizabeth Warren's. I'm not impressed at all. Like, it's unfortunate that this is going to be more and more so of the case. And Andrew Yang and his campaign need to focus on a good and solid and very easily digestible response to this, to bring up the fact of why automation is indeed, in fact, the issue, and to also think of it as some sort of constant over time, is to disregard the exponential pace, is to disregard the fact that the singularity is at hand. It's very close. So those are the smaller parts of today's discussion. Kind of just disappointment from Elizabeth Warren, disappointment from Mehdi Hasan, but that's kind of what we were expecting, In today's day and age, the only thing I find myself excited for is Andrew Yang. So we've got tomorrow, he's going to be showing up on Bill Maher later at night, and I think as well he's going to be on Dave Rubin's podcast, which is drawing a bunch of ire from people on the left, like, oh, you shouldn't even engage with Dave Rubin. I haven't seen any of his stuff personally, but I hear that he caters to an alt-right audience. So this is segueing into the meat and potatoes, which is the adpocalypse and censorship on the internet. Listen, Dave Rubin and the people that he caters to, they are just as deserving of hearing what Andrew Yang has to say. And because Andrew Yang goes on that discussion panel, I'm not sure if it's a podcast or a what you would call it. Just because he's doing this interview doesn't make him an alt-right personality himself. We have to get back to, kind of some cordiality, or some word that means, a common ground. We have to be able to reach across the aisle politically and ideologically, or else people will just continue to fall into their own echo chambers. So I applaud Andrew Yang for doing this, and I don't think that there's any reason to be upset or fearful of him doing it. He's going to get attacked either way, and we can see that. We can already see that. So, like I said earlier, this most recent wave of censorship, especially directed at conservative and alt-right personalities, seems to be a little bit more intense than what's happened before. It seems like it's really starting to ramp up, and I didn't realize this until I looked a little bit further into it. There are, some actual examples of full-on removal from the platform. Up until this point, we had seen demonetization as a way of censoring, and this is the thing. So let's just get really into this right now. Outside of actually full-on banning people, which the universal basic income is not going to do anything to help with that, demonetization is censorship. And a lot of people don't understand this. So really quick, let's just define what demonetization is. Let's say that I, a budding YouTuber on his quest for 1,000 subscribers, please ring the bell and, subscribe. I'm making some political discussion videos about Andrew Yang and universal basic income. And it turns out that some of the people who are running, YouTube, they aren't really a fan of people having money and being able to make some decisions for themselves. And they say, well, we're not going to full on remove him. He's still going to have the ability to reach his audience and have freedom of speech, but we're not going to let advertisers have to worry about associating themselves with his radical type of ideas about financial freedom in the post-industrial age. So they go through and they strike my account, they demonetize my video. I'm unable to put advertisements on my video and get some residual money from you, the viewers. So this is censorship, because if you're not able to make money by doing the videos, there is an amount of upkeep. There's just basic costs of life. You need to be able to afford your food and your rent, and you're not going to spend time doing what is a lot of work, as I've found out, to not get any sort of compensation for it. So it is censorship. It absolutely is. And they wouldn't be demonetizing it if it wasn't censorship. As I said earlier, I don't want to run advertisements on my channel. I want to be able to speak as freely as possible and also save people from the nonsense, which is advertising. I've always hated advertising, and yeah, but people need it in order to make their business successful and everything. I don't really care. I just don't. I feel like advertisements are kind of like just brainwashing propaganda tools, and we need a lot less of it, and it'd be a better world without it. So I'm going forward and making sure that you'll never see an advertisement on my account, but in doing so, it does beg the question, how exactly would I be able to go forward and continue making these videos if I'm not using an advertisement-based model? And for that reason, I keep on hitting that. I wonder why. And for that reason, it's very important. And Sam Harris talks a lot about this, in that if you're consuming content, you should think about seriously putting $1 or something, buying, what's the equivalent of a Starbucks drink if you've got the money for it. I would never ask anyone for anything if they didn't have the disposable income to do so, because this allows them to maintain their ability to have discussion which is not corrupted or tainted by the expectations of a third-party advertiser. And what I'm trying to get across to people, this is a very interesting idea, is that a universal basic income solves the problem of demonetization. It doesn't solve the issue of flat out censorship and removal and banning. But if censorship can be attributed to the lack of monetization, having a universal basic income at the very least would allow you to be funded every month of $1,000, whatever you're able to do outside of rent. It's not going to be perfect. Maybe you could pick up a part-time job and continue to do what you want to do. Regardless of what kind of view you have, you wouldn't have to worry if you were an alt-right or a conservative personality. You've got $1,000 every month. You're not necessarily having to find some way of getting an income stream. But even more so than that, if everyone has $1,000 a month, the goal, of course, is more than $1,000 a month. The goal is a certain amount of disposable income that every single individual in the country will have for certain for every month. It would feel a lot easier for me to go to my audience and say, listen, if you enjoy the show, please, out of your universal basic income, if you've got like $1 you think you could spare, toss it my way. And then let's say I've got 400 viewers and each of them say, yeah, I've got $1. Yeah, I've got a lot more income at this point. You're then able to really go forward at the base and have the issue of a Kafkaesque kind of authority of monetization. That's no longer an issue. I like to expand this a lot further into like charities and things of that nature. Amelia Clark on the front page of the Game of Thrones Reddit, thanking them all so much for donating to her charity to address brain trauma and things of that nature. Like, if you have a charitable bone in your pocket, you're now able to fund whatever things you find bring you value in some way. So if you find that Securing the Bag is helpful to keep you informed about these types of ideas and everything, and you're a little more able to use your funds to kind of promote the continuation of that service or thing of that nature. So this is such a radical change if you think about what this means going forward into the future. And it fits along perfectly with the evolution of work. And this is that the future of work is already here. And I sound like a lunatic when I talk about this, but I'm going to be proven right, just like I'm going to be proven right about Andrew Yang being president. And that is, if we take a look at the trends of what type of work is most lucrative now in the future, it's increasingly digital work. It's increasingly, social. Ask any kid these days, what do you want to be when you grow up? 10, 15 years ago, you would have heard a lot of them saying, oh, a lawyer or a doctor or, whatever their parents told them is going to make them the big bucks. But these days, they're growing up with phones in their pockets and they're able to see superstars playing video games, playing Fortnite, social media influencers, and a whole bunch of, for girls, makeup artists and things of that nature and all of that. And of course you're going to look at that, especially as a young person, and say, that's what I want to do. You're telling me that I can make money doing something that I love doing, right? Like, that's what everyone has always told their kids through the history of time, find something you enjoy doing, and you can make money at the same time. Well, here it's going to become a lot more difficult. I'm not trying to say, let me be very clear. I'm not trying to say that the future is everybody suddenly video gaming and streaming and broadcasting themselves, or doing a political talk show live stream about Andrew Yang. I would love that. But, obviously not everyone's going to be destined to have this kind of work. But that's the point. That's why I think it's even more important that we have a universal basic income. The only way that we can have this type of work existing, if enough manual labor, if enough of like the hard, tangible GDP is being done autonomously. That is my firm belief. And is about to just get even more so with 3.5 million truck driving, transportation, logistics jobs being done by autonomous robots. This is how we've wound up in a world in which a video game streamer playing Fortnite getting headshots is making $10 million a year, right? Ninja made $10 million in 2017. But you'll have a single mother with 2 kids having to work 2 jobs to barely make ends meet, At the end of Hassan's podcast, he said, I don't buy the dystopia that Yang is talking about where robots will take all of our jobs. The dystopia is already here. The dystopia is already here. You've got this juxtaposition of a single mother working her ass off and having to, compare that with the fact that a kid sitting on his ass working for McDonald's a couple of years earlier is now a multi-millionaire, is now incredibly successful. And people will come back to me and say, well, that's always existed. You can look at football players and entertainers and all of that. Not really. I mean, if you look way back into the 1900s, the early Industrial Revolution, it existed, but not in the type of amount that we see now. It's been growing more and more and more and more so. And these are value exchanges that you're making with with me, the YouTuber. You're saying, I value you. I have enough value to say, here's a little bit more, or an advertiser has enough value to say, here's a little bit more here. It is a form of economic activity, right? I mean, he's being taxed, Ninja's being taxed on $10 million for sure. There's a lot less tax happening than, I thought I had that muted. There's a lot less tax happening from Ninja than there would be in a previous kind of exchange that you had with, a fully staffed media studio whose job it is to edit and promote and everything. He's kind of a one-man team. I know that he's probably got a lot of other things. He's probably got a housemaid that he's paying, so that's some form of wealth distribution. But, again, the trend is fewer jobs created over time. Blockbuster's employed 400,000 people. Netflix employs 16,000 people, right? We've got more highly paid jobs coming through with less people that are being employed, less tax revenue that is coming through. It's a really big issue, and it's a dystopia that I continue to kind of try and wrap my brain around. And a lot of people will say, hey, well, you're just jealous because you wanted to be a video game streamer and it didn't work out for you. Yeah, you're damn right. But that's beside the point. The point still remains that, we were telling our kids like 10, 20 years ago, listen, Joey, get off the couch, stop playing video games. You're going to be a parasite to society. And now what? Now we turn around and the parasites of society are the new multimillionaires. They're the new people who apparently produce value. They produce something that people are willing to spend money on. Yeah, I know Ninja makes money from advertisement revenue, but a lot of it too is donations, man. A lot of it too are people going through and saying like, I've got a crazy amount of money, I'm bored, and I want you to say something funny on stream. And they just, bam, $100 down and everything. So that's a dystopia. That is an absolute dystopia. If we have reached this kind of economic activity, we need to bite poverty in the ass. It is just not cool. It is not freaking cool that you can have poverty existing side by side with that kind of activity, right? Am I alone on this? Because I don't see other people bringing it up. And I think I understand why, because it's very easy for people to put this in a light of like, your argument's flawed in a very significant way. But like, I think that's just because we don't allow ourselves to think about this. Like I said in an earlier episode, from like when we were kids, we were constantly taking a look at saying, this person does this and they get rewarded for that by this. And we are always trying to think of a great way. We have our dreams. We're going to do that and we're going to make money doing that. But eventually we get to the point where it's like, oh yeah, all of that's nonsense. You're going to have to go to work 8 hours a day, even though you're just sitting and working on a spreadsheet and you're producing meaningless value, or in a worst case, actually destroying value, which you absolutely can destroy value. Trust me. I destroyed value all the time working at a call center where we would overcharge people $300 because they went over on gigabyte usage. Do you know how much a gigabyte costs to use? It doesn't. It's like pennies, if you can even think of that. You know, I'm sitting there looking at like South Korea where they've got $60 gigabyte for everyone. You know, like it's government issued and everything, and a gigabyte speed, so like 1 gigabyte per second you would download. Meanwhile, I'm over here overcharging people because they're going over on a 10 megabit connection. Like, I'm going off on a tangent here. But this infuriates me. I have so much to talk about here. I'm going to have to save some of it because I'll be talking all freaking night about this. The future of work is coming. The technological singularity is at hand, and reality is going to continue getting weirder and weirder and weirder. I hear a lot of people saying clown world, and I hate that that's somehow also associated with the alt-right. But it's true. Clown world makes sense, and I've been expecting this to happen for a little while because people are saying, what the hell is going on? That's the entire point of the singularity, is that the reality stops making sense, right? You get these windows of understanding where it's like, if you were to show a iPhone 10 to someone who's using one of those big ass blocky phones with the huge antenna that you have to charge like for 3 days straight, they go, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, that doesn't make sense. You're going to start saying that doesn't make sense a lot more often. I talked about that Black Mirror episode last night with Captain America, and I found myself going, hold on, that doesn't make sense, but I also understood that that's where we're heading. And the important thing for you to understand is that we have the potential to do very good with this technology. But we also have to accept that life is going to change in very dramatic ways. And to all the boomers out there who might get a little bit upset for me saying, yeah, you know what, maybe we should just embrace the fact that people can make money playing video games and end poverty, that's just the hard truth of it. Reality is going to continue to change. We have to do our best to keep up the pace, or else it's going to get extremely, extremely. I don't want to get too, I want to stay positive because that's the angle that I do come from this. And if you've read any of Steven Pinker's work, Enlightenment Now, you'll see if you like zoom out on a macro scale, the world is so much better than at any other time in human history. There's just no denying it. Like, absolute poverty in terms of like you are starving, like you're lucky to eat like 3 times a month, that has been going down at unprecedented levels. People are living better lives and more nutritious lives across the globe. It just so happens that in the developed world, we're seeing the dissolution of human labor at a scale that just doesn't quite make sense to us, and we're not handling it in a good way. We're not handling it like we need to, and Yang's the guy with the plan, and math is the path, and the Yang gang is going to secure the bag in 2020, and I'm going to help doing it with this live stream. So that's quite a huge tangent. I still have more to talk about with it though, and I'm going to go ahead and do so because we've got still 10 minutes left. I don't know, how are you guys doing? It's Thursday. I mean, like I said earlier, there's not that much going on in the news, but maybe I missed something. If you guys know of anything going on with Yang, or you want me to address anything, like, for real, I want this chat to be like a place that the Yang gang just kind of gets together with. And that's why, please, like, continue to share it, because this will get a lot easier for me when you guys are doing half of the talking too. Geez. Yeah, so Thursday, we're going through July. soon, June 26th. That's going to be the day. I would love to see someone kind of just bring this up when they bring it to the crowd and they're like, how do you justify Bernie Sanders? How do you justify demanding people join a jobs guarantee program when their kid is making $1 million playing video games, right? Like a jobs guarantee program is the least progressive thing that I can imagine because the rich don't have to deal with a jobs guarantee program. This is just another way to get poverty extracted. I'm sorry, to get labor extracted from people who are impoverished. You know, it's another way of saying, oh, hey, if you don't do this, if you don't do what I need you to do, you're not going to get enough to eat. You're not going to get enough to live. Yang Gang understands that's not the reason that people choose to work. We choose to work because we want a shiny new car. We choose to work because we want a brand new house. Consumerism's been drilled into us from the beginning, and that's not going to change. That makes it even more concerning that I see Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders coming through and saying, we should really do a jobs program because people don't want to be given something for nothing, even though you can justify the fact that they deserve to be compensated for being economic actors in the most advanced economy in the world. This is just so weird. It feels even more dystopian. If you give this kind of power over to Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, they may do great things with it in the first year, but I do not want to live in the type of world that it will be, because you're going to have that singularity right on the cusp. Like I said, as that's happening, you're also getting people with more and more power to decide how you choose to live your life in the most technologically advanced age that we've ever seen. More so than that, I accept that there is a lot of work that needs to be done. There is a lot of work like infrastructure, still waiting on Infrastructure Week and all these things. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done that people don't like to do. But is it just me, or should we be trying to find ways of automating that work first? If you have less people, let's just say that indeed some of these jobs are only being done because you've got people who would be homeless if they weren't doing them. Let's say that that's a fact. Well, then give everyone a universal basic income. Those people will demand their worth. They'll demand better working conditions, and the price of those jobs will go up. You'll have more expensive types of work like that. And then you've got a greater incentive to find ways of actually automating that. I see that as a win-win. I see that as people no longer having to struggle to survive. And I see more reason to innovate and to automate the types of work that are more dangerous, more disgusting, all of those things, I definitely am in the camp that we should be working less and we should be finding more purpose within our lives. Work and purpose are two extremely different things, man. Like if you're a single mother taking care of 2 children, you're working your ass off, but you're not getting a paycheck for it, And what we decide as work can now be playing video games. So why aren't we concerned about how Ninja's purpose is? Do you think that Ninja is sitting around going, oh, you know what? I'm not actually working. I mean, I'm really enjoying this. Should we really be afraid for Ninja right now? Maybe we should start a hashtag mental health awareness for Ninja, because obviously he can't be in a good place because he's not working, right? No, what's worse than mental health issues from feeling purposelessness is mental health issues from financial insecurity. You get your financials taken care of, you've got the ability to go out and do whatever you want, especially with the type of technology you've got in your pocket. You want to learn how to play a musical instrument? That's going to be a very purpose-filling type of activity to do. We just have to change the conversation. We have to open up work to new areas and say, yes, it should be that if you're taking care of kids, that you're viewed as working. It should be that if you're taking care of a sick parent, that you're working. Because if we've gotten to the point that you can be Ninja playing video games, shooting heads, getting Fortnite bucks, getting the big dollars, if we've gotten to the point of accepting that as work, then we owe it to all of the people in poverty, to all of the people struggling to make ends meet, to say that they indeed are working as well. Boy, I am really like this is the point for me. Like this is what drives me every single day, you know, to fight for Andrew Yang, to fight for the universal basic income. And it seems like a weird place to be, and I don't see a lot of other people coming from that angle. But yeah, I don't want us to turn into Hunger Games. I don't want us to turn into like just the charismatic, the most charismatic of us, the ones that are able to make other people laugh. They get to eat. But not only do they get to eat, they get to live a more luxurious life than anyone before them ever could. I'm definitely starting to ramble right now. You know, I've got 5 minutes till an hour, but because, again, there wasn't that much to talk about, I'm just going to go ahead and call it here. We've got we'll have a lot more to talk about tomorrow, I think. I don't know when Build Monitor, it's probably after 7, but we'll at least discuss the Dave Rubin podcast, and I'll see you on day 19 of the countdown to the Democratic debates. Yang Gang, thank you so much. Make sure you're subscribed and check me out on Twitter at Dividend Report. The intro music was Death Note by Polyphia. Definitely check them out. They are amazing. I don't know what else to say. Thanks for joining. You guys have a good night.